Welcome to Chronosphere. I'm your host, and today we're diving into one of the most infamous maritime disasters in history, the sinking of the RMS Titanic. On the night of April 14, 1912, the world's most luxurious ocean liner struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic, leading to a tragedy that claimed over 1,500 lives and forever changed maritime safety regulations. This is a story of human ambition, technological hubris, and the thin line between triumph and catastrophe. The RMS Titanic was the pride of the White Star Line, a marvel of early 20th century engineering. At 882 feet long and weighing over 46,000 tons, she was the largest moving object ever created by human hands at that time. Her construction in Belfast, Ireland, took 3 years and employed over 3,000 workers. The ship featured unprecedented luxury, grand staircases, Turkish baths, a swimming pool, and opulent first-class cabins that rivaled the finest hotels in Europe. But beyond the glamour, Titanic was also promoted as a triumph of modern technology. Her double-bottom hull and 16 watertight compartments led many to believe she was practically unsinkable. One crew member allegedly claimed that God himself could not sink this ship. This confidence would prove tragically misplaced. On April 10, 1912, Titanic departed Southampton, England, on her maiden voyage to New York City, carrying approximately 2,224 passengers and crew. Among them were some of the wealthiest people in the world, including John Jacob Astor IV, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Molly Brown. But the ship also carried hundreds of third-class passengers, immigrants seeking a new life in America, families with dreams of opportunity. The first few days of the voyage were uneventful. Titanic made stops in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland, before heading into the open Atlantic. Captain Edward Smith, a veteran with 40 years of experience, commanded the vessel. Despite receiving several ice warnings from other ships in the area, Titanic maintained her speed of approximately 22 knots, nearly top speed. This wasn't unusual for the time. Ships often raced to maintain schedules and compete for the prestigious Blue Ribbon Award for the fastest Atlantic crossing. The wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, were overwhelmed with transmitting passenger messages and tragically didn't prioritize all the ice warnings to the bridge. On the evening of April 14th, the temperature dropped sharply, a telltale sign of nearby ice. Lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee stood watch in the Crown's Nest, scanning the calm, moonless sea. Visibility was excellent, but they had no binoculars. The key to the locker had been misplaced during crew changes in Southampton. At 11:40 p.m., Fleet spotted something. Ahead, a dark mass against the starlit horizon, an iceberg. He immediately rang the warning bell 3 times and telephoned the bridge. Iceberg, right ahead. First Officer William Murdoch ordered hard a starboard and signaled the engine room to reverse engines. In those critical 37 seconds, Titanic began to turn. For a moment, it seemed she might clear the berg, but the ship was simply too large, too fast, and too close. The iceberg scraped along Titanic's starboard side below the waterline, creating a series of openings across 6 of her watertight compartments. Passengers in third class felt a grinding sensation. First-class passengers barely noticed. Some later recalled thinking they'd merely grazed something. Ice chunks scattered across the forward well deck, and some passengers playfully kicked them around, unaware of the catastrophe unfolding beneath their feet. Captain Smith and the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, who was aboard for the maiden voyage, quickly assessed the damage. Andrews's verdict was devastating. Titanic could stay afloat with 4 compartments flooded, but not 6. The ship was doomed. He gave her an hour, perhaps an hour and a half. The unsinkable ship was sinking. At 12:05 a.m., Captain Smith gave the order to uncover the lifeboats and prepare for evacuation. The wireless operators began sending distress calls, CQD, and the newer SOS signal. The nearest ship, the Calfarnian, was only about 10 miles away, but her wireless operator had gone off duty just minutes before. The Carpathia, 58 miles away, received the signal and immediately changed course, but would take nearly 4 hours to arrive. Here's where the true horror begins. Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for 1,178 people, just over half of those aboard. This actually exceeded the regulations of the time, which were based on a ship's tonnage, not passenger capacity. The regulations hadn't kept pace with the rapid increase in ship sizes. The evacuation was disorganized and chaotic. Many passengers didn't believe the ship was actually sinking. The night was freezing, around 28 degrees Fahrenheit, but calm. Titanic's lights blazed. The band played ragtime music on deck, and to many, boarding a small lifeboat to drift into the dark Atlantic seemed more dangerous than staying aboard the massive, well-lit liner. The order was women and children first, but its interpretation varied. On the port side, Second Officer Lightoller interpreted it strictly, allowing almost no men aboard. On the starboard side, First Officer Murdoch allowed men when no women were nearby. Many lifeboats left half full. Lifeboat 1, with a capacity of 40, carried only 12 people. Lifeboat 6 left with only 26 of its 65 seats filled. Third-class passengers faced additional barriers. Gates separating the classes were initially kept locked, following immigration regulations that required segregation. Language barriers complicated instructions. By the time many third-class passengers reached the boat deck, most lifeboats had gone. As Titanic's bow sank lower, her stern began rising out of the water. By 2 a.m., the forward deck was underwater. Passengers clung to railings as the deck tilted at increasingly severe angles. The ship's band, led by Wallace Hartley, continued playing. Accounts differ on the final song, with many citing the hymn, "Nearer, My God, to Thee." Father Thomas Biles heard confessions and led prayers. Benjamin Guggenheim and his valet changed into evening wear, determined to die like gentlemen. Isidore and Ida Strauss, owners of Macy's department store, refused to be separated. Ida gave up her seat in a lifeboat, choosing to stay with her husband of 40 years. At approximately 2:18 a.m., Titanic's lights went out as her boilers flooded. Then, with a tremendous roar, the ship broke in two between the third and fourth funnels. The bow section immediately sank. The stern, briefly settling back level, quickly turned vertical and stood against the night sky, a horrifying sight witnessed by those in the lifeboats. At 2:20 a.m., it slipped beneath the surface. Over 1,500 people were now in the 28-degree Fahrenheit water. Hypothermia sets in within minutes at such temperatures. The cries for help were overwhelming. Survivors later described them as the most haunting sound they'd ever heard. Those cries gradually faded as people succumbed to the cold. Only 2 lifeboats returned to pick up survivors from the water, despite many boats being partially empty. Lifeboat 14, under the command of 5th Officer Harold Lowe, rescued 4 people. The decision not to return haunted many survivors for the rest of their lives. The Carpathia arrived at 4 a.m., navigating through the same ice field that had doomed Titanic. Captain Arthur Rostron ordered rockets fired and lights lit to guide survivors. Over the next several hours, 710 people were pulled from the lifeboats, exhausted, traumatized, many suffering from hypothermia and shock. The Calfarnian arrived later that morning, too late to help. The controversy over whether her crew had seen Titanic's distress rockets still generates debate. The rescue efforts complete, Carpathia set course for New York, arriving on April 18th to a crowd of over 40,000 people. The disaster sent shockwaves around the world. The loss of life was staggering, but what made it particularly tragic was how preventable it seemed. If Titanic had carried enough lifeboats, if ice warnings had been heeded, if the ship had slowed down, if nearby ships had responded, so many ifs. The casualty rates told a grim story of class disparity. 60% of first-class passengers survived, compared to 42% of second-class and only 25% of third-class. Children in third class were less likely to survive than first-class men. The crew suffered heavily too, with over 700 deaths. The sinking of Titanic led to sweeping changes in maritime safety. Within months, the first International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea was held. New regulations required ships to carry enough lifeboats for everyone aboard, mandated 24-hour radio watch, and established the International Ice Patrol to monitor icebergs in the North Atlantic. Titanic's wreck wasn't discovered until 1985, when Robert Ballard located her 12,500 feet below the surface, broken in two as survivors had described. The ship has become an underwater museum, slowly deteriorating but still capturing our imagination. Why does Titanic continue to fascinate us over a century later? Perhaps because it represents the limits of human ambition. Here was the greatest ship ever built, declared unsinkable, destroyed on her maiden voyage by nature's simplest weapon, frozen water. It's a reminder of our vulnerability despite our technological prowess. The stories of heroism, the band playing to the end, the wireless operators staying at their posts, individuals giving up their lives for others, inspire us. But so do the failures, the insufficient lifeboats, the ignored warnings, the class barriers that cost lives, which remind us of the importance of regulation, preparedness, and human equality. The Titanic disaster claimed 1,517 lives on that cold April night in 1912. Behind that number were individuals with dreams, families, futures. Some were wealthy industrialists, others poor immigrants. Some were crew members doing their duty, others passengers simply seeking passage across the Atlantic. The unsinkable ship sank, but the lessons learned have saved countless lives in the century since. Every safety regulation, every lifeboat drill, every maritime protocol bears the invisible imprint of those who perished when Titanic met her iceberg. As we remember this tragedy, we honor not just those who died, but the fundamental truth their deaths revealed, that no human achievement is beyond failure, that hubris invites disaster, and that the price of ignoring warnings and cutting corners can be measured in lives lost. Thank you for joining me on Chronosphere. Until next time, remember the lessons of history.